Mara Calloway had always believed that love was something you earned. She grew up watching her mother fold herself smaller to fit inside her father's world. Quieter at dinners, softer in arguments, invisible at pack gatherings where the men spoke and the women poured tea. And so Mara had learned, the way children learn things they are never directly taught, that a woman's job was to make herself easy to keep. She had spent 6 years doing exactly that for Caden Voss. 6 years of showing up to every pack event he forgot to mention she was invited to. 6 years of learning how he liked his coffee, which topics made him shut down, which silences meant he was angry versus just tired. 6 years of being the first person he called when something went wrong and the last person he thought about when something went right. She did not complain. She told herself that was what love looked like: patient, quiet, consistent. She told herself that Caden was a good man under the pressure of becoming alpha, that he would soften once things settled, that the bond between them would eventually become something he spoke about out loud instead of something she carried alone in her chest. She bought a white dress for the ceremony. She saved for 3 months. She had it altered twice. On the night of the full moon gathering, she stood in the center of the great hall with every member of Silvercrest Pack surrounding her in a wide circle. Elders in the front row, younger wolves pressed close behind, candles burning in iron holders along the walls. The air smelled like pine and burning wax. Her heart was so full she could barely breathe. Caden walked onto the platform. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in the dark ceremonial clothes of a future alpha. He looked exactly like the man she had spent 6 years loving. He looked at her the way he always looked at her, like she was familiar, like she was fine. And then he took one slow step back. "I reject you," he said. His voice was steady, calm, like he had practiced it. "You are not strong enough to be my Luna." No one moved. No one breathed. Mara stood in the center of the circle in her white dress and felt the words land in her chest one by one, like stones dropped into still water. She waited for herself to fall apart. She had always imagined, in the quiet hours when fear crept in, that if this moment ever came, she would not survive it. That she would collapse, or scream, or beg. She had been afraid of that, afraid of what grief would make her do in front of everyone. But she did not collapse. She did not scream. She stood very still, and she breathed, and something inside her that had been waiting for a very long time finally went quiet. She reached down and untied the white ceremonial ribbon from her wrist, the one she had knotted there before leaving her apartment, the one she had touched 3 times on the drive over for luck. She placed it carefully on the floor at her feet. She looked up once, not at Caden, but at the elders, who were watching her with something close to shame on their faces. Then she turned and walked out. She did not look back, not at the ribbon, not at the hall, not at Caden Voss, who stood on the platform with his hands at his sides and watched her go. She packed her apartment in 4 hours. Not in the frantic, tearful way of someone running, in the methodical, clear-headed way of someone who has finally made a decision they should have made a long time ago. She folded her clothes. She wrapped her herbs. She took the small framed photograph of her mother off the kitchen shelf and tucked it between 2 sweaters. Her best friend, Lena, sat on the edge of the bed and watched her with red eyes and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that Mara had not already thought. "I'm going to Ashvale," Mara said. "That's 3 territories away. I know. You don't know anyone there. I know. Elder Senna is looking for an apprentice. I sent her a letter 2 weeks ago." She folded the last shirt and pressed the lid of the bag closed. "I think some part of me knew," Lena cried. Mara held her for a long time, and then she picked up her bags and drove south, and did not look in the rearview mirror once. Ashvale was a small town that belonged to no single pack. It sat at the meeting point of 3 territories, which meant it had always operated as neutral ground, a place where wolves passed through, traded, rested, and moved on. There was no alpha who ruled it absolutely, no hierarchy that pressed down on every moment of daily life. People in Ashvale had manners, not rankings. Mara arrived on a Wednesday morning with 2 bags, a box of dried herbs, and a letter of introduction from a pack healer back home, who had taught her the basics of plant medicine when she was 15. Elder Senna met her at the door of the healing cottage, a small woman with white hair, and hands that looked like they had worked every day of 80 years. She looked Mara over slowly. "You have a rejection mark," she said. It was not a question. In the healing world, you learn to read people's bodies the way others read maps. "Yes," Mara said. "Does it still hurt?" Mara thought about it honestly. "Less than I expected." Senna nodded and opened the door wider. "Then come in. We have work to do." The work was real. That was the first thing Mara understood about Ashvale. Senna did not ask her to observe from a corner. From the first week, Mara was grinding medicine, preparing tinctures, sitting with patients who came through the cottage door, travelers with road injuries, mothers with sick children, elderly wolves whose joints ached in the cold. She learned the names of plants she had never heard of. She learned how to ask a patient the right questions to understand what they were not saying. She learned that healing was mostly about paying attention, and that she was, it turned out, very good at paying attention. She planted herbs on the cottage windowsill. She learned the names of the children who played in the market square, and which ones were likely to skin their knees by afternoon. She started sleeping well. She started eating properly. She started laughing, first small, surprised laughs, then the real kind that came up from somewhere deep. She did not think about Caden Voss, or when she did, it was with a kind of flat, distant curiosity, the way you think about a place you used to live in, that no longer feels like home. 6 months into her new life, she was elbow-deep in a batch of medicinal poultice on a Tuesday morning when the door of the cottage opened and a man walked in who would, though she did not know it yet, change the entire direction of her life. His name was Dorian Ashford, and he was the Alpha King of Iron Vale. She did not know that when she met him. She knew only that he was tall, quiet, and that he had walked into the cottage without announcing himself or expecting anyone to stand up straighter because he had entered the room. He had dark eyes, and the kind of calm that did not feel performed. He asked for Elder Senna by name, politely, without looking around the room as though he owned it. Senna came out from the back, and the two of them spoke quietly about a medical order, specific herbs for a specific condition. His younger sister, Senna explained to Mara later, had a rare illness that most pack healers did not know how to treat. Senna's tinctures were the only thing that had been helping. He came back 3 days later for the second part of the order. Mara was alone in the cottage. She handed him the wrapped package and went back to her work, and he paused at the door and asked, with genuine curiosity, what she was making. She told him. He asked a follow-up question. She answered. He asked another. 30 minutes later, he was sitting on the wooden stool across from her workbench, and they were talking, not about pack politics or territory or rank, but about plant compounds and the chemistry of healing and whether the old methods or the new methods produced better results. He had read widely. He listened more than he spoke. He did not try to redirect the conversation toward himself. When he finally left, he said, "Thank you. This was the most interesting 30 minutes I've had in 6 months." Mara looked up from her work and almost smiled. "You should get out more." He laughed, a real one, quick and surprised. Then he left. He came back the next day, and the day after that. Dorian extended his stay in Ashvale twice. The trade negotiations he had come for wrapped up in 10 days. He stayed for 3 weeks. Then he rearranged his schedule and stayed for 5. His advisors were patient about it, in the way that people are patient when they can see something happening that their leader cannot yet name. He and Mara fell into an easy rhythm. Morning conversations over tea on the cottage steps. Evening walks through the market when her work was done. He told her about Iron Vale, its history, its people, the way it felt in winter when the valley filled with snow. She told him about her mother, about Silvercrest, about the white dress and the white ribbon on the floor. She told it the way she had learned to tell hard things, flatly, without performance, just the facts of it laid out in order. She watched his face while she talked. He did not flinch or rush to fill the silence with reassurance. He just listened, and when she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "That man stood in front of everyone who knew him," Dorian said, "and told them all that you weren't enough. And then he watched you walk out in a white dress with your head up." He shook his head slowly. "That's not a story about your weakness. That's a story about his." Mara looked at him. "I know," she said, and for the first time, she completely meant it. He invited her to visit Iron Vale. Not to take any title, not to make any promises, just to see it, he said. Just to come and spend a week and see if she could love it. She went, and Iron Vale was nothing like she expected. It was older than Silvercrest, quieter, more rooted. The kind of place that had existed for so long it had stopped trying to prove anything. The people were direct and warm in equal measure. The elders welcomed her with food and questions about her work. Within 2 days, 3 different mothers had asked her to look at a sick child, or an infected cut, or a troublesome cough, and she had, easily, naturally, because helping was simply what her hands knew how to do. She walked through the valley on the 5th evening, looking at the lights of the town below spread out across the dark, and she understood something very quietly inside herself. She had spent 6 years trying to fit into a space that was too small for her. She had made herself compact and careful and easy, and she had told herself that was love. She had stood in a great hall in a white dress and been told she was not enough, and some old part of her had almost believed it. But here was a valley full of people who had asked for her help by the second morning. Here was an elder who had handed her the most difficult cases without hesitation. Here was a man who rearranged his entire schedule and read books about plant medicine because he wanted to be able to talk with her. She was not too small. She had been in a space that was too small. On the last evening before she was meant to return to Ashvale, Dorian found her at the valley's edge. He sat beside her and looked out at the same view and did not rush her. "What are you thinking?" he said. She considered her answer. "That I spent a long time being grateful someone kept me around," she said. "I think I'd like to know what it feels like to just be wanted. Not because I'm useful, not because I'm patient, just wanted." He turned to look at her. "Then stay," he said. "Not as Luna. Not yet. Just stay." She stayed. The bonding ceremony happened 8 months later. It was small, by Dorian's preference and Mara's request. 50 people, candlelight. Elder Senna traveled from Ashvale and stood at the front with the expression of a woman who was not surprised at all. Dorian's sister, healthier now, her color better, her laugh easy, held a bundle of wildflowers and cried happily in the front row. When Dorian took Mara's hands and spoke the formal words of the ceremony, he added one line that was not part of any traditional ritual. He added it because he meant it, and because he wanted everyone in the room to hear it. "She is not here because I needed a Luna," he said. "She is here because I cannot imagine being the man I want to be without her beside me." Mara did not cry. She smiled, the kind of smile that starts somewhere behind the eyes, the kind that comes when something inside you that has been held tight for a very long time, finally, gently opens. It was almost a year later when she found out that Caden Voss had come to the border of Iron Vale and asked to speak with her. Dorian told her calmly, without drama, and asked her what she wanted to do. She thought about it for exactly 1 evening. Then she said she would see him. They met in the open courtyard. Caden looked older than she remembered. Not badly, just heavier, like a man who had been carrying something difficult for a while. He came with an apology that was genuine. She could tell. He told her his wolf had not settled since the rejection. He told her he had understood too late what he had given up. He told her he was sorry, not in the quick, deflecting way of someone who wants to be forgiven so they can stop feeling bad, but in the slow, honest way of someone who had actually looked at themselves and not liked what they saw. She let him finish. Then she said, "I believe you, and I hope it makes you better. For the next person. For your pack. For yourself." She looked at him steadily. "But Caden, you didn't reject me because you didn't love me. You rejected me because you didn't believe I was worth standing beside. That's not something an apology can fix from my end. That's something only you can grow through." She stood up and held out her hand. He shook it. "I hope you find your peace," she said, and she meant that too. She walked back inside, past the guards, through the hall, to the warm room, where Dorian was waiting with tea already made, and no questions ready. Only presence, only patience, only the simple, steady fact of him being there. She sat down beside him. She exhaled. Outside, the valley was full of evening light, and somewhere in a room down the corridor, their daughter was sleeping, 4 months old, small and perfect, and entirely unaware that she had been born into a life her mother had built from the ground up, from the ruins of a white ribbon on a cold hall floor. Mara reached across the table and covered Dorian's hand with hers. She did not say anything. She did not need to. This was what enough felt like. This was what wanted felt like. And it had been worth every single step it took to get here.